Tonight on Reporting Scotland. Does Holyrood have the right to pass its own Brexit law as an alternative to Westminster legislation? The UK's highest court decides. A 10% rise in the number of children under 12 in Scotland on antidepressants.
I think we're giving antidepressants too freely to young children for, I would say, events in life that they're facing, that it's everyday life events.
Also in the programme. The Trump Organisation reveals plans to build 500 homes at its golf resort in Aberdeenshire. A record number of Scots will take part in this year's European Athletics Championships. We speak to one first-timer. Good evening. The Scottish and UK Parliaments have gone head-to-head in the highest court in the land over post-Brexit powers. The two-day hearing at the Supreme Court will decide whether Holyrood went beyond its powers in passing a Brexit law as an alternative to legislation in the House of Commons. But our Westminster correspondent David Porter is at the court this evening. David.
Jackie, this has the feeling of being a significant milestone in the wider devolution process. For the first time, Westminster is objecting to legislation passed by the Holyrood Parliament. As one lawyer involved in the proceedings today said, this was like shaking up the constitutional kaleidoscope. Now, this has all come about because the Scottish and UK governments embarked on protracted negotiations to decide what will happen to powers after Brexit. Powers such as agriculture, the environment and fishing. They didn't manage to get any agreement, so both Westminster and Holyrood decided that they would pass their own legislation. Now the Supreme Court is being asked if, in effect, the Holyrood Parliament overstepped the mark. The politicians have not been able to agree. Now the lawyers and the judges are being asked to sort this out. Here's my colleague Nick Eardley.
Long road to Brexit. Like repairs on Big Ben, a process that's far from finished, but it's one that's often felt relentless, sometimes like it's moving at a snail's pace, as those in charge weave their way around various twists and turns. Today's stop, the Supreme Court in London, where the top judges in the UK are assessing who has what power in this process. The topic, how we prepare our laws for life outside the EU. The UK government's plan has been described by Scottish ministers as a power grab. They introduced their own alternative legislation to try and stop it. But there are questions over whether the Scottish Parliament has the power to pass this bill. Today the UK government argued it went beyond Holyrood's remit.
The Scottish bill is plainly and directly inconsistent with the United Kingdom Act at the most basic of levels, and its mechanisms directly frustrate the purpose of the UK Act.
He wants judges to strike down Holyrood's bill, but the Scottish Government's top law officer insists it is within Holyrood's powers and is necessary because the Scottish Parliament doesn't agree with the UK legislation.
While the Scottish Government's preferred position has consistently been for a single UK Act to which the Scottish Parliament can consent, that qualification was not a trivial one.
Much of what's being discussed in there today is highly legalistic, but this case matters. It's the first time a bill passed by the Scottish Parliament has been referred to the Supreme Court, and at its heart is the question of what Holyrood can and can't do. If the top judges in the land decide to uphold the Scottish bill, it'll create a massive headache for the Prime Minister. Tomorrow we'll hear more of the Scottish Government's case. The ruling, though, is still some weeks away. Nick Eardley, reporting Scotland at the Supreme Court in London.
Tomorrow, with further interventions by the Lord Advocate with submissions on behalf of the Scottish Government, we will also hear evidence from the Welsh and the Northern Irish administrations. This case is being watched very, very closely, not just by the politicians but by lawyers as well. If it goes in favour of the Scottish Government, well then that could see far more powers for the Scottish Parliament. If it goes in favour of the UK Government, well then Westminster will take the main role. The judgment will not come for a number of weeks. The judges, who are the most senior judges in the UK, will want to consider this very carefully. We will not get a result of this case till the autumn at the earliest. Jackie.
Thank you very much, David Porter. The number of young people in Scotland on antidepressants has increased by 10% over the last 3 years. There were similar trends in England and Northern Ireland. The figures come from a BBC investigation which will be on Radio 4 tonight. Here's our health correspondent, Lisa Summers.
The use of antidepressants for children in Scotland has been rising year on year. Today's figures once again put the spotlight on mental health services for children. The figures show a small rise in under 18s from 5,564 to 5,572. In under 12s prescribed antidepressants, the figures were up from 221 children in Scotland to 252. That's a 26% rise over 3 years, although the numbers are small. Annette Mackenzie is fighting to improve mental health services for young people. Her daughter Brittany struggled with anxiety. She took her own life in 2016.
I think we're giving antidepressants too freely to young children for, I would say, events in life that they're facing, that it's everyday life events that they're not used to because they are growing up, they're getting older. This world obviously it's a scary place.
Some younger children will be prescribed antidepressants for conditions such as OCD and ADHD. Geraldine Miners runs a support group for parents.
It could be appropriate to use antidepressants in combination with psychological therapies, and I think that's really important because antidepressants are cheap, a lot cheaper than providing one-to-one talking therapies, so they shouldn't be used on their own. But in extremis, of course.
Some parents will say that medication is the right course of action for their children, but this upward trend does raise some important questions. Are we getting better at understanding and therefore treating mental illness, or is it simply because our doctors and our services are overwhelmed?
We certainly need to train more doctors and more clinicians of all disciplines to support the mental health of our young population. When it comes to a so-called quick fix, there certainly isn't any such thing. And I have a lot of trust that my colleagues take prescribing to young brains very seriously indeed.
The new Mental Health Minister says they are working to improve access to these services.
Antidepressants may be part of that treatment package, but not the only part of that treatment package. They can access social care, social prescribing, and also psychological therapies, and that's got to be a whole package for children who are receiving antidepressants.
With less stigma and greater awareness, demand is growing, and the problem of how to curb a crisis in mental health services is not going anywhere soon.
Well, Lisa joins us now. Lisa, I think the question that some people might be asking themselves is, should children be given antidepressants at all?
Well, it is a controversial issue, but it's also a very, very key question. And there are many people who will say that medication does have its place, providing the guidelines are followed, providing that it's in tandem with other support services, then it can work. And we wouldn't be having the same sort of conversation if this was about physical illness. But it's also important to point out that there isn't the same comprehensive body of evidence that shows the long-term effects of antidepressants on children. But this also feeds into the kind of wider issue of access to mental health services. We all know that there are long waiting lists to see CAMHS, and we know you have to be at a pretty critical point to actually be referred to see a mental health professional. So what should we be doing in order to try to stop it getting to that point where services are already stretched? There's some research, for example, that if you've had a major traumatic experience in your childhood, you're highly likely to develop mental health problems. So should we be putting mechanisms in place earlier on to try to stop people getting to that point of crisis? We know it's not an easy fix, but what we do know is that demand is going only in one direction, and that is up.
Lisa Summers, thank you very much for that. The Trump Organisation has announced plans for hundreds of homes at its golf resort in Aberdeenshire. The company, now headed by the US President's sons, Eric and Don Jr., says it'll invest £150 million in the development at the Many estate. Our reporter Rachel Bell has more.
In July 2012, Donald Trump officially opened his new golf course on the Many estate in Aberdeenshire. he promised to spend £1 billion. The original plans included 2 golf courses, hundreds of homes and a large hotel. Today, there's 1 course, a clubhouse and a small hotel at the original estate house. Now the Trump organisation says the time is right for the next phase of the development.
This actually comprises of 85 units, and it's a mix of 2-bedroom cottages and 5-bedroom mansion houses.
500 homes, 50 hotel cottages, a sports centre, shops and an equestrian space. So why has it taken so long?
Remember, it took years for us to put a spade in the ground. The planning process has been complex, it has been protracted, we've had a number of challenges that we've had to overcome. So I would actually contest the point that it has taken 10 years. It has actually, relatively speaking, been a very short period of time.
Much of the development was put on hold while they fought and lost a lengthy legal fight against this offshore wind farm. The Trump organisation is now looking to move forward with the next stage of their plans, but this Aberdeenshire councillor is yet to be convinced.
We've had a long catalogue of plans being announced, plans being changed, plans being withdrawn, or simply not implemented. And frankly, it's like listening to a Donald Trump speech. It's a procession of contradictions, irrational statements, implausible exaggerations and unlikely predictions, and this is just the latest of them.
Donald Trump's decision to build a golf course in Aberdeenshire continues to be controversial. This new plan looks set to be a fresh headache for the authorities.
Well, Rachel is with us. Rachel, we heard the councillor's scepticism there about the process. What does happen next?
Well, in the past hour, actually, we heard from Aberdeenshire Council that they have received the planning application from Trump International. And Eric Trump, who heads up the company, says that subject to that planning approval, they're hoping to break ground here as early as next year. He says the timing is right and they remain fully committed to the long-term vision for this site. But in terms of the local community here, earlier today I spoke to David Milne, who's a local resident. He objected to the plans initially, and he told me that 10 years ago it came down to a case of economy over the environment. And he says there's been no economic benefit. He says there's no second course, there's no large hotel. And he believes that the Trump organisation are pressing ahead with these new plans, which are economically beneficial to them, but come at the expense of the local community and the environment here.
Thank you very much, Rachel. The High Street is struggling, from closures of big-name stores to an increasing number of boarded-up shops locally. Well, confirmation of the shrinking industry came today, with research showing in recent years more than 16,000 retail jobs have been lost across Scotland. And that's according to the group that represents the sector, the Scottish Retail Consortium. Between 2008 to 2015, turnover was up by nearly 9%, but the number of shops was down nearly 8%. And there are big differences around the country. Well, one of the areas worst affected by the retail downturn is Inverclyde. And our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser, joins us from Greenock now. Douglas.
Jackie, yes, I'm on a traditional shopping street in the heart of Greenock. It's like many streets right across Scotland in towns like this, particularly towns that are close enough to cities where people can get on the motorway and they're drawn in by their work, by shopping opportunities there are in the cities, really affecting towns like this. If I look around me, the kind of things I can buy would start with a sausage roll when that is open. I could get for vaping, electronic cigarettes. I can get a manicure. I can get a lot of stuff from charity shops. There's a lot of betting shops as well. But above all, there's shops that are boarded up, that are for sale, that are for letting. According to the survey that you were citing there, the Inverclyde figures show that quarter of the jobs in the 7 years you're talking about have been lost in retail in the Inverclyde area, including Greenock and Gourock and Port Glasgow. The spending in this area is down by very nearly half. Now, what's been going on here? Well, it's partly because of weak household incomes. This is not a particularly well-off part of Scotland. It's also that the population has been falling in Inverclyde. And a lot of big supermarkets are drawing custom away from these smaller traditional shops, retail parks as well. Now, these are very big employers, they're very important, but the more we are doing our own scanning at the cash desk at supermarkets, then the fewer jobs there are available. Of course, the most efficient retailer of all, if you go a couple of miles in that direction just beyond Gourock, you get to one of Scotland's 2 gigantic Amazon fulfilment centres. That's a warehouse to you or me, and it's that online shopping which is causing probably the biggest change to conventional retail.
That's Douglas Fraser in Greenock. Well, it's almost 7:15. A reminder now of tonight's main story. The UK and Scottish Parliaments go head-to-head at the Supreme Court over Brexit legislation. The UK's highest court will decide if Holyrood has the right to pass its own alternative Brexit law. And still to come, Celtic will be without striker Moussa Dembele for their Champions League qualifier tomorrow. A mother has spoken out about the racist abuse her son faced as a mixed-race child while they were living in Edinburgh. Kirsty Nakow says her son faced physical abuse and racist taunts which left him asking to leave his primary school. She's calling for more understanding of diversity in the classroom. Ian McInnes reports.
I wasn't really sad, I was just sort of scared.
Tili and his mum enjoying their new home in the Highlands. But his experiences in Edinburgh certainly made their mark. The worst part?
Mostly just them running up to me and saying the N-words. That was pretty much the most, sort of harmful thing I could really think of.
Tili went to this school in Edinburgh, his Fijian father serving in One Scots, his mother teaching in the city. But it was one weekend incident which shook the family.
It was kids messing about to begin with, but the youngest one had a stick and had been whacking Tili with the stick. So Tili tried to stop him whacking him with the stick. And so the rest of them all decided to pile in on Tili. They held him down, kicked him in the ribs, gouged down his back. And when I was asking him about what they were seeing, of course, it turned out there was racist comments being said as well.
The police investigated the incident as a hate crime, but there was more to come as Tili was targeted with racist abuse at school.
He came home from school and his daughter had graffiti all over it. The N-word had been used along with other slurs, so racism was very much a factor in it.
We asked the school for a response and Edinburgh City Council said they do not tolerate racism in any of their schools and that instances are dealt with promptly. But across the country, it seems such incidents are on the rise.
The reports from teachers that stand up to racism has been getting in recent times is that kind of abuse is getting, unfortunately, more and more common. This is something that is far too prevalent in our schools.
Tili has now moved to the Queen Victoria boarding school near Dunblane, which teaches the children of Forces parents. The move was something he wanted.
The primary schools, that's the kind of time where you'll make, the friends that you'd be with for life, and, the people that was there, I didn't really want to be friends with them, so I thought, should just go there.
Mum Kirstine is calling for more of an understanding of diversity in schools, but she says that any changes must come from the home.
I know and recognise that language doesn't come from the children, it comes from the parents. More has to be done to educate children because it's too late, I think, to fix what's in the parents' head.
Ian McInnes reporting Scotland in Inverness.
A clifftop coastal path is to be created around Scotland's most southerly peninsula. The 64-mile Mull of Galloway walking route will stretch from Luce Bay to Loch Ryan. More than £650,000 of lottery cash has been awarded to complete the route by connecting and repairing existing paths, building new ones and providing signage, seats and interpretation boards. Archaeologists on an Orkney island have uncovered the preserved handprint of a Pictish metalsmith. The print was found in the remains of a workshop on Rowsey. The building is part of a substantial Iron Age settlement at the Swandrow Dig, which the archaeologists are racing to excavate before it's destroyed by the sea. Now, a record number of Scots will take part in this year's European Athletics Championships. 17 track and field athletes have been named in the Great Britain team for the big event in Berlin at the start of next month. Some are veterans of the event, but David Curry's been speaking to an athlete making her first appearance.
This is Dolly, and this is her owner, Gemma Reekie.
She's actually really fast. I take her down to the beach and I think she could probably beat me in a sprint.
Gemma won't be seeing Dolly for a few weeks. The European Under-20s 1500 metres champion packing for her first crack at the Senior Championship.
I still can't believe it, and this year's just been crazy, and it's been so much better than what I expected. I expected just to be racing abroad and getting some experience, but to be making senior Great Britain teams, yeah, it's been amazing.
It's going to be tight on the line. Muir wins. Oscar Clark gets...
Gemma's training partner Laura Muir is also Berlin bound. The European indoor champion, a bit of a role model for 20-year-old Gemma.
She pushes me on and I push her on, and yeah, we've got a good age gap, so she's 25 and I'm 20, so she's doing really well just now, and I'm just coming through and she teaches me a lot.
Muir and Riki are among 17 Scots in Team GB, more than ever before. What does that say about the strength of Scottish athletics?
If I put it down, if I look back to the number of years before that, we started to put in place support to clubs. We started to support coaches better. We started to support athletes more. That's absolutely key. But also, I think what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years is this mindset, this winning mindset. You know, with Eilidh Doyle, Laura Muir, Lindsay, Chris O'Hare and co. You can win medals at major championships if you're Scottish, and you can compete with the world's best.
Through, but it's Childs' goal, just Eilidh Childs' goals.
While it's Gemma's first European Championship, some other Scots are a bit more experienced. Eilidh Doyle won gold in the 400 metres hurdles in 2014. This will be a record-equalling 5th championships for her. David Curry, reporting Scotland.
Well, football now, and Celtic will be without Moussa Dembele for the Champions League qualifier with Rosenborg. The striker has a hamstring injury picked up in the previous round. Meanwhile, the Norwegian side arrive in Scotland with a new man in charge, having sacked their coach after their last victory. John Barnes reports.
It's all quiet with the preparations here at Celtic's training ground for tomorrow night's match with Rosenborg. However, there's turmoil in the Norwegian camp. They've sacked their head coach, the players want him reinstated, but the board have said no. Celtic's Craig Gordon has experienced a similar situation when he was at Hearts. They sacked George Burley and the players had to react and perform after his disappearance.
Certainly that did give us a little dent at that time, and I don't know the situation in Rosenborg, so it's difficult to comment on the situation there. But for us, it was tinged with a little bit of disappointment that it took us a few weeks to recover from. But we, as a group of players, we managed to do that because we still had a big challenge.
It can either work one or two ways. It can either galvanise the team, or it can have a negative effect. So. But we'll see. Our concentration is very much on ourselves for us to do our own job, and we'll look to do that over the 2 legs.
However, Celtic will have to do it without striker Moussa Dembele. Despite scoring twice in the last round, he also suffered a hamstring injury.
Sometimes the hamstring can be 6 to 8 weeks, but this is one that, from the time it happened, we were told probably 2 to 3 weeks maximum. So it's unfortunate because he's been. He's obviously looked very, very good over pre-season, but he'll be back fit and strong in the next few weeks.
This afternoon, just to add to Rosenborg's woes, their flight into Glasgow was delayed. John Barnes, reporting Scotland.
Now, if you've been given one of the most important portrait commissions of your life, you'd ideally like more than 3.5 hours with your subject. But that was all Victoria Crowe got to paint Prince Charles. It's the first specially commissioned portrait of the Duke of Rothesay to become part of Scotland's national art collection. Suzanne Allen reports.
The Duke of Rothesay as you've never seen him before. Painted in a room at Burke Hall on the Balmoral estate in January this year.
It was great. I mean, I'd wanted to paint Prince Charles for quite a long time. The sittings actually added up to about 3.5 hours. I felt the time pressure because I knew that he was being extremely generous with his time, because at first I thought I was going to get 1 hour.
The Prince has been seen as a serious figure in the past, but it was generally thought to be a welcoming gesture to the then Meghan Markle when he walked her down the aisle during the recent royal wedding. Victoria Crowe is known for relaxed sittings to bring out her subject's personality. How would you describe him?
Very, very warm, thoughtful, generous. We had a lot of things to laugh about, which was good.
Most importantly, did he like the portrait?
Yes, he did. He was pleased because he felt it made him look like he was listening.
For now, this portrait will stay here in the Great Hall at the Scottish National Portrait Gallery. All his ancestors are here, the Queen Mother, and this frieze round the wall which depicts kings and queens through the ages of Scotland and the UK. So he's in good company. Suzanne Allen reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, let's get the weather picture now from Christopher.
Jackie, thank you. Hello there, good evening to you. It was largely dry and bright for most of us today. Great picture from one of our weather watchers on Lewis there, but you may have wanted to shelter in that cave through the afternoon because there's been a number of showers through the Western Isles. Elsewhere, largely dry, variable amounts of clouds, and in the sunshine, temperatures reached 21 degrees. Through the course of this evening and overnight, most of those showers tend to fizzle and fade away, perhaps one or two holding on in the far northwest. So a dry night with some cloud and temperatures around 10 to 12 Celsius, a touch cooler through parts of rural Aberdeenshire. To tomorrow and another largely dry day, some cloud around in the morning, but it will brighten up through the course of Wednesday with some long spells of sunshine. Once again, though, a number of showers towards the far northwest with thicker cloud here. So by mid-afternoon, it's dry with some sunshine and temperatures higher than today, 19 to 23 Celsius. Perhaps one or two showers over towards the capital through the Lothians and borders, but really fairly isolated. More chance of getting a shower up towards the Western Isles. Elsewhere, though, as you can see, largely dry and in the sunshine. Quite a pleasant feel. Winds coming in from the southwest, generally light to moderate, perhaps a wee bit fresher around the northwest coast. Rest of the afternoon into the evening and overnight, little in the way of change really, largely dry. And that takes us to Thursday. And you can see out in the Atlantic a fairly large area of low pressure, threatening to bring some outbreaks of rain, but doesn't really materialise, I have to say, at least on Thursday. So here's Thursday, mostly dry, plenty of sunshine and warmer, actually. Quite a humid feel, temperatures 25, maybe 26 degrees. There's that weather front, just bringing some thickening cloud and outbreaks of rain. But really, it's Friday that we'll start to see some wet weather. That weather front still with us in the west, and this feature in the east bringing up a number of thundery downpours. So Friday, quite a lively end to the week with outbreaks of rain and some thunderstorms. Quite a humid feel once again. Temperatures around the low to mid-20s for most. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. Firefighters in Greece say the number of people killed in wildfires around Athens has risen to 74. Nearly 200 people have been injured. The Greek authorities have suggested that some of the fires may have been started deliberately. And that's Reporting Scotland. We're back at 10:30, but from all of us, good evening.